I want my team to be using AI. If we hold back from saying we're using it, it almost becomes taboo. I can't remember what it was that he typed in, but it was like witchcraft, right? This thing that came out at the end, I was like, hang on a minute, this is just genuinely game changing. Because I feel like I can talk about stuff, but I can't generally put it into text. 95% of what we do is reviewing documents. And coming back to the point around speed at which people require an answer now, we're very honest about our use of AI, and I think we need to be. It's phenomenal. Yeah. It's picking up things that you wouldn't necessarily pick up. The ability now to upload documents is brilliant. I genuinely use it every day for something.
Welcome to Bricks, Bytes and Bold Moves, the future of real estate. Today we're talking to Ross Gissane, Sector Managing Director for Property and Investment. Did I get that right?
You got that right.
At Arcadis. And I'd love to start, Ross, by hearing how you started in property, and I guess what the industry means to you.
Okay. Well, how I started in property is a degree in building surveying from Reading. Why I took a degree in building surveying from Reading is anyone's clue, to be honest.
Right.
I wasn't particularly, I want to be in real estate. I want to be a building surveyor. My dad's a decorator. My uncle's a decorator. My uncles and cousins are carpenters, and my mum's a project manager at the post office. So I was always in and around construction. Wasn't particularly academic. And it seemed like probably the best course I could get on with the average grades that I managed to get. That said, I think I made a really good choice, and it's an industry that has always surprised me as I've sort of moved through my career. Mm-hmm. I think there's this perception that building surveying is very much, go and look at a house, what's wrong with the roof? Is there a problem with the boiler? And whilst that, yes, is part of the industry, it's a really, really small part of the industry. And as you start to look at the commercial sector and start to look at the different opportunities for working as a building surveyor in niche service lines, it just opens up such a huge array of opportunities, which led me to where I've worked. I worked in America, I've worked in Australasia, I've worked in Kazakhstan, I've worked across Europe. All as a building surveyor, and all before I was 30. Yeah. So it does offer some excellent opportunities for people.
And I'd love a brief tour of building surveying. It's great to have someone here with the deep expertise, but the passion. What are those exciting niches? What are the bits people don't know about?
Well, as I say, I think the thing that everyone knows about. If I go out and I'm with people and they go, hey, what do you do? I'm a building surveyor. They automatically think estate agent, home condition surveys, structural surveys, and that is a big part of it. Right?
Do they ask you to check the damp?
Occasionally, I do remember being at a party years ago, and they did ask me if I could come upstairs and check their floorboards for them. You have to be very careful, because if you give someone some advice that they don't like, it's not as good. I mean, that happened in New Zealand quite a lot. I mean, in New Zealand, there's an issue called leaky building syndrome, which effectively was, it's really, really long story cut short, right? But effectively, they changed the way that people wanted to build houses or build residential accommodation, which basically led to water penetrating the external wall surface, getting into the timber, which they determined in the 90s didn't need to be treated anymore, so therefore got rotten, deteriorated, and it caused massive problems, nationally, and like really impacted on people personally. Their money's wrapped up in these houses. They spent a fortune on them. They got mortgages on them. There wasn't anyone to kind of sue.
Right.
And my girlfriend, my wife now, would be at work, and she'd mention what I did, and we'd be invited round. Oh, can you have a look at your house? And you'd be 500 meters away, and you could tell that there was a problem with the house, and it's a really horrible thing to have to do, to go to someone's house as a friend and go, you've got a significant problem here. So there's a really niche.
That's a great
niche example for you. Something else I did in Kazakhstan was and again, going back to this, like, impacting on people's day to day, right? So I was asked to look at what was known as the rotational village in Kazakhstan, and it was a workers' accommodation village, housed about 8,000 people in the desert.
Yeah.
And we had to go there and assess whether the worker accommodation was up to standard to support getting finance from the EBRD. So the EBRD lend money to big projects in developing nations, but they want to make sure that people are looked after. And there's various things. Yeah. But some of them are like, is it adequately heated? Is it, is it secure? Does it have rooms that are the right size for people to live in, etc.? And some of the things you see in these countries are just horrendous. But being able to give advice around how you improve it and make these things better for people to live is actually quite rewarding, and something that, as I say, you go into university and you talk about dilapidations. That isn't necessarily the thing that you think you're going to be doing 5 years later. So yeah, it can be an incredibly varied career. But you have to look for it, otherwise you will be doing party wall surveys. And there's nothing wrong with doing party wall surveys, but it is quite vanilla, and often people can get a little bit bored and wary of it. And I think,
what are your favourite types of projects? What's the stuff you get really excited about?
Well, I'm a technical due diligence, and I'm sure there's party wall surveyors out there saying, I can't believe you do technical due diligence.
This is the wonderful thing about being human, right?
Exactly.
We're so different.
Over and over again, and that's absolutely right. We all went and trained at the same place, but I'm doing technical due diligence, and someone else is doing DLAPs, and I love it and they love it, and we hate each other's kind of disciplines, as it were. But yeah, technical due diligence for me, the ability to advise a client on whether they should buy something, if there's issues with that asset, what issues there are, how you can move forward with those issues, and technical due diligence over the past few years has just become more and more important to the deal process. A good few years ago, you would do technical due diligence, it would tick a box, it would get them bank financing, and everyone was happy. The value of the asset would go up. Now with the Building Safety Act, with ESG requirements, with data complexity, the advice that surveyors are giving, and other professionals as well, mechanical, electrical professionals, environmental due diligence professionals, is becoming more and more relevant and considered a lot more as part of that deal process. It's become a lot more interesting, a lot more varied.
So does that mean now technical due diligence is much more likely to actually drive a decision to buy or not buy? In the past, maybe it was just sort of a...
Yeah, to a point. I think it's less about whether it would be to buy or not to buy. It does happen. In fact, before I came here, I was talking to someone who did pull out of a DD exercise, pull out of a deal due to the due diligence. But it's more about how they maybe structure the deal.
Right.
Is there a discount? If there's not a discount, but they buy the asset, how quickly and what decisions do they need to make in terms of OPEX and CAPEX in order to meet their return requirements? So there's a lot more than, here's a report, I'll see you next time you buy something. It's a lot more, here's a report, how can we work with you?
Does that mean there's more ongoing technical due diligence?
I think there's more advice. You wouldn't necessarily call it technical due diligence as such, but we are getting asked a lot more questions post-transaction into that asset management piece. So that asset management piece that used to be very much around tenancies, rentals, valuations, there's a lot more now around, well, actually, in order to improve valuations, we need to improve sustainability, for example. In order to maintain our Building Safety Act position, we need to make sure that we've got the right data and documentation in place. And we're getting asked a lot of specific questions about, have we got the right information?
Yeah.
If we haven't, what do we need to do?
Yeah. When we haven't, normally, right?
Yeah, well, no, I wouldn't go that far. Not there. But it's a completely moving feast. And I think as an industry, we were really lucky for 20 years where nothing really seemed to change. We had.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's when you look back, you think, what did really change? There was a real big pause there on that.
It was huge. I mean, the control of asbestos regulations that came in was like a massive, massive deal.
Yeah.
Right? And not too much happened since.
When was that? Do you remember?
I think you're going to kill me now.
I can't date it.
Control of asbestos regulations, it's like 98 or 2000, something like that.
But a good 25 years, yeah.
Oh yeah, it was a good while ago, right? It's one of these things that I actually think we've kind of lost sight of a little bit as well. So when we go around a lot of assets and we ask for the asbestos management plan, it's not always as good as it should be.
Right. Yeah.
So whereas obviously with Grenfell and the fire regulations, obviously that's really raised to the top. And, you know, I'm not suggesting it shouldn't be, but I think maybe it's taken over some of the other things that we also need to be wary about, right?
Yeah.
Control of asbestos and making sure that people are aware of where it is in an asset is absolutely vital, right? I know it's not something that's going to maybe cause a problem immediately, but down the road, it's you know, it's really not a nice way to go.
It's an interesting point because there's only so many professionals and so much expertise in the industry, and so to both change to new legislation, but also to focus on all the important things is it's not easy, right? It's quite a big ask in many ways.
And as I say, the regulation is changing and it's still almost not set, right?
Yeah.
The Building Safety Act stuff is still so open to interpretation in a sense. I mean, we're seeing PAS reports being issued, right? And a PAS report should effectively say your building's all good, right? And it does, and it signs it off.
Yeah.
But there's the PAS report signing it off, and there's what the market expects. And then they don't necessarily align at the moment. And I think they will, right? But at the moment, they don't necessarily get there. So there's this kind of requirement for technical advisors, whether they be building surveyors or fire engineers or other people, to kind of come in and go, well, actually, is that good enough, and provide that extra advice. But add to that the ESG requirements, EPCs, all those types of things that have just kind of come and are now becoming more and more prominent in why people do deals. It's a much more varied report than it ever was, and there's a lot more around data and opinion than there ever was. And like you say, supply of technical advisors is not good, right?
I've yet to meet the person who is not struggling to find great people in the industry.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think we're the only industry though, right?
Well, our workforce is aging, and the demographics aren't in our favour on that front. But
100%. The amount of people coming out of university and not maybe...
Well, there's less people coming out of university. It's just the demographic shifts because, you know, as fertility's dropped in the UK and the West, you get an older workforce, less people do the work. It's one of the reasons that we're so vociferously focused on kind of the future of work. We think we need that automation to kind of deal with the changing demographics and the shrinking workforce and the future we all want, essentially.
I think that's absolutely right. You know, and we as a business at Arcadis, you know, we are really trying to invest in AI, and how can that help us when we're not getting the supply of people that we probably need.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's very, as I say, it's very difficult for someone to come into an industry that's changing so rapidly with more and more regulations to become an expert and be able to really stand up to, you know, what clients expect of you, right? It's difficult to get the experience.
Do you think the discipline's getting more complicated?
100%. 100%. And, you know, assets are becoming more complicated. You know, we talk about a building is relatively straightforward, but when you start adding technology into it, and when you start adding in the way that leases are structured slightly differently now, and you know, we put solar panels on the roof. Well, who owns the solar panels? Who owns the condition of the roof? Who owns all these things just make everything slightly more complicated and one-offs. And the way that we're buying like PRS and student accommodation, you know, when I was a student, the only student accommodation was what the university provided.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Now there's just some of this stuff is just incredible.
Or maybe 9 bedrooms in an old Victorian house owned by a local landlord.
Where actually condition had absolutely no relevance to it whatsoever. But you know, but you go into student accommodation now and it's just phenomenal. You know, some of the facilities that are there, the way that they like. I've worked with lots of student accommodation providers, and they genuinely care about the students, how they interact with the space. Yeah. Because it's, you know, the value is basically a review online that says, I absolutely love being at X, Y, or Z student accommodation. That creates the value. So it's everything is more complicated. and everything is needed a lot quicker than it ever was.
Yes, quite, yeah. Which is a good segue to talk about AI in real estate.
Yeah.
I know that you have generally been a big fan of asking the question, how can we solve our problems with technology, or how can we make things better with technology?
Yeah.
But I'd love to start on the personal side of things. I feel like everyone has an aha moment with generative AI in particular, where they've been using, ChatGPT, Gemini, one of the kind of consumer tools, and have had that moment where they've gone, oh my gosh, I can't believe a computer can do this. Do you have one of those? Would you share?
I don't know if it was me using it or one of my colleagues who you've met, Phil, who's absolutely brilliant at this stuff, an absolute techie, right?
Yeah.
And if you asked him, right, this isn't me being nasty, he would go, I am a complete geek, right? And he would phone me up for various things, and he would talk about stuff that I would struggle to understand and comprehend. And we were on a call one day, and he goes, yeah, but have you used this?
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, Phil, just whatever, I really need to move on. And he opened up his screen and he showed me ChatGPT as it was, 18 months ago, whenever, I don't even know what it's
all that time ago.
Yeah, like, totally different
product back then, basically. Yeah.
And I can't remember what it was that he typed in.
Yeah.
But it was like witchcraft, right? This thing that came out at the end, I was like, hang on a minute. And for the first time ever, Phil wasn't talking in ones and dots and zeros and all these types of things. I was like, hang on a minute. And then, I always have to pull Phil back and go, no, what do you actually mean?
Yeah.
Stop talking about whatever, because it's not relevant to me. But as he started to show me examples of what it could do, I was just like, my God, this is genuinely game changing beyond what I'm involved in. And anyone who works with me will realise that just on a real basic level, my emails are terrible, right?
Right.
I have a level of dyslexia, and if I can concentrate on something for half an hour, send it out, and 5 minutes later see a problem in it.
Right. Yeah. Right. I know that feeling. So
just using it for that, for me originally was like, oh my God, this is just genuinely game changing, because I feel like I can talk about stuff, but I can't generally put it into text. Yeah,
that makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
And it was that, and then you sort of go, oh well, if I can I, as they started to say, well, actually you can add documents to this now, right? And I'm going, well, 95% of what we do is reviewing documents and ensuring that they're correct, or that how have they changed over time, and just being able to ask it those questions. And coming back to the point around speed at which people require an answer now, you're able then to go, well, I'm not going to rely on it fully, right? You can't, right? Well, I'm not even going to go to it, right? Everyone
we can talk about human in the loop in a second.
I'm sure everyone who's listening to this podcast has a realization that you can't kind of stand by everything. You have to do your own research and all those types of things. But what it does do is go from a blank page to something.
Yes.
Right? Or it points out something that might be missing or might not be quite right.
Yeah.
So we were testing it with a few things. I think a client phoned me up one day and said, look, they'd had a problem with one of their assets in relation to CDM regs in the UK. And their question was, well, what is what's the situation with the equivalent CDM regs across Europe? Right. Now we've got, as a business, we're 40,000 people, and we've got 8,000 people across Europe, right? So we could get the answer, but it's going to take some time, right? Because we have to identify the right people, we have to brief them in the right way, and we have to get the result back, and then we have to kind of collate it into a result that kind of you can match against each other. We did it in an hour and a half, right? And it's a lot easier to go out to your team in Europe and go, here is an answer, is this correct, than can you give me an answer to something, And,
yes, absolutely.
And immediately, I mean, we didn't charge the client for it, but you probably could have done.
Yeah.
We're very honest about our use of AI, and I think we need to be, particularly when you're in senior leadership roles, right? I want my team to be using AI, because I think it's really, really important. It's the future. And I think if we hold back from saying we're using it, it almost becomes taboo.
Right, I see.
And actually, it's not. It's there to help. It's an aid, right? And we got this document back, and you're just like, this is incredible. What this has done. would have taken weeks to do. And we were able to give the client an answer. You're like, oh. And I guess that was a bit of an aha moment. And then you go, what else can this do?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you start to fiddle around with, and the thing that really opened my eyes, 6-9 months later, was when you started to be able to take photographs.
Yes, yeah.
And we were just fiddling around. We were taking photographs, like, show me the health and safety issues within this photo.
Yeah, I think I've seen that demo,
And it's phenomenal. Yeah. It's picking up things that you wouldn't necessarily pick up. And all right, some of it maybe isn't necessarily relevant. Yeah. But it starts to make you ask yourself the question, what is the broader context? So, yeah, I mean, I'm a massive advocate. I don't even remember what the start of the question was. Well, I mean, I'm a massive advocate for it. And my issue is, and what's really interesting, actually, as I've started to have questions and talk to various people who are more AI or more robotics, I find that they're completely interested in what I'm saying, like where I think it can be used.
Yeah.
Because they hadn't thought about it. And vice versa. I'm like, what, you can do that? That's I was talking to someone. So for me now, AI is less about the. I kind of get the output, right? I kind of get where it's going in a sense, but it's the collection of the data in order for it to be done.
Yes.
So at the moment, I feel like there's still this kind of like, I need to consolidate the documents, or I need to go out and I need to collect the information, and then I can ask the AI the questions I need to ask it.
Yeah.
Right. What really interests me now is how do I collect the data more efficiently, right? Yes, so I've been talking, spot the dog, right? So we've spoken to Boston about, could we put one of these dogs on a site and let it scan and the answer is, well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
That blows your mind, right?
When you intersect robotics and that kind of,
Yeah, the first port of call for me after that call was to our health and safety guys to go, can I put one of these dogs on there? Because I'm worried that, this dog's going to walk around a corner and scare a bricklayer to having a heart attack, right? But he, like
presumably
me,
it's not covered in the guidance either directly.
Well, this is it. All these things are just like so new. Like, how do you get over that, right? And his thought was, well, actually, it wouldn't take very long for people to become accustomed to this random dog walking around a site, right? But the thing about it was, it could collect so much data, and you don't have to be there, and it could check if people are wearing a hard hat, if people have got their PPE on. Right.
I do wonder how they react on site to it.
Well, you'd worry about someone kicking it off the side of the road.
Exactly. I feel like
it's 50 grand down the toilet.
Exactly. Yeah. There might be a lot of accidents.
This dog running around. But the concept is there, and I was also talking to a company that make they call magnet crawler robots, right? And they just crawl up the side of metal buildings.
Yeah.
And they were developed for. I think they were developed for ships to assess the outside of ships, and they hadn't thought about a different use, right? That was these are built for assessing the side of a ship, and I'm going, well, I'd put it on the roof of a building like a warehouse, and I'd have it go backwards and forwards scanning the roof, and it could do that for the rest of the time with I would never have to go there. So for me, it's the health and safety element of it.
More current, more up-to-date data.
Predicting where it's going in terms of deterioration. Now, I've seen that on, that was a good few years ago now, where I was talking to a company that flew drones around offshore oil rigs.
Right, yeah.
To look at corrosion and how corrosion starts to increase, and at what point you make the investment to repair it.
Yeah.
At what point has it gone beyond repairs, kind of thing. And you're like, wow, that's corrosion, right? And in Arcadis in Holland, we've got scanners that look at roads for pothole deterioration. But as that kind of the ability to assess gets wider and wider, and the defects that it can assess get bigger, it just opens up so many possibilities. Anyway, sorry, the reason for the magnet crawler. Yeah. So I was talking to, and obviously we've got a big problem at the moment with cladding, and we spend a hell of a lot of money and time and effort taking cladding panels off to determine what's behind them, right? Yeah. And I was explaining this to the guys that developed this robot, and they were like, well, we're just fire like sonar do it, or LiDAR or radar or something, and it would tell us the thickness, and we could therefore work out what was behind it. They never obviously thought about using it in my
no,
industry,
of course,
and it never occurred to me that you could do something like that. And I think as you start to have these conversations, the opportunities for its use just get bigger and bigger, and it's really quite exciting in that sense.
I think one of the big trends we will see over the next few years is that collection of data, the cost of doing that radically decreasing, and then the feasibility of doing it increasing, which of course opens up lots of opportunity. And also, I guess it creates a bit of a burden because we'll have to do something with it, or there'll be an expectation that something has to happen with all this information we're amassing.
Yes, yeah, I guess, and from my perspective, I think one of the issues around sort of getting the industry to really use it is that kind of turkey voting for Christmas, right?
Right, yeah.
If I can get an indoor drone to do the work for me, well, what is it that I'm going to do? And I think it's trying to change that narrative and going, well, it changes your role, yes.
Yeah.
But there is still a role for you, right? It's a different type of role. It's that real consultation around what the data is. But
I mean, there's been big changes in technology, though, that have changed the role and the job and the day-to-day
100%.
Over the last 10, 15, 20 years. Well, forever, but...
Yeah, but the speed of that change is just getting bigger and bigger. I mean, I reflect back when I was thinking about this podcast, I was reflecting back to what I was doing at the start of my career.
Yeah.
Right? And when I say it out loud, it makes me feel like I'm like 80, right? But I genuinely remember going to site with a tape measure.
Yeah.
Not a laser tape, a tape measure, right? At university, I used a chain. We did chain surveys. I don't think they were doing chain surveys in the Middle Ages, right? But, we went from tape measure to laser tape to laser scanner to drone. And that is phenomenal. When I started in the industry, I was given an A to Z.
Yeah.
And then that moved to printouts of maps from Google Maps or whatever it was. I can't even remember what it probably was.
It was Google, I remember the printouts of Google Maps,
And now it's like I've got 2 GPSs in my pocket wherever I go.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal the changes that we've gone through, and I sometimes am a little bit underwhelmed by it. I sort of go, us surveyors, we're quite slow at moving forward. But then I go, we've moved all the way through that phase. We've moved from post. I mean, again, I used to go to Snappy Snaps.
Right, yeah.
For reports. We used to take photographs, go to Snappy Snaps, get the photos, glue them in and post them. Right, that was our report, would be posted off.
That is quite different to how that looks today, right?
just a bit, and I think a lot of it, if a practical example of that would be schedules of condition, right? So we'd go and we'd do a schedule of condition and we'd say, okay, your roof's in this condition. At the end of your lease, it needs to be put back into this condition. Well, we're now at a point where we have enough data that we should really be able to determine the condition at the end of a lease when they start the lease. And therefore the whole process of dilapidations kind of falls away a little bit, right? So it genuinely is game changing if we get it right. I don't think we're going to get there in the next 2 years, but it does feel like we're moving in that direction. And I think that changes, going back to the original point, I think that changes the nature of the people that will enter the industry. They're less like me, where their dad was a builder or a decorator, and they're more, want to get into analytics, or they want to get into technology. We're not a building surveyor is a data analyst.
Yeah, that's a good framing. I can definitely relate to that.
We collect data, we analyse it, and we give a report. And I think the sooner we get to that point of going, well, actually understanding how a foundation is poured is less relevant now than it ever was, because we've got the data that says what a foundation is and how long it lasts.
Right, yeah.
And that's it, right? That's all you need to know.
I wonder how this looks today. Like where you've seen kind of the things that are happening now or just about to happen that you're kind of most excited about.
I mean, I think that's it. I think it comes down to the photographic stuff, right?
Right.
The collecting data through photos and being able to analyse those photos and doing a lot more off-site. So during COVID, we had quite a few issues where we weren't allowed to have more than one person visiting site. Yeah. So we invested in head cams, right? And we had building surveyors going around, and they were looking at mechanical and electrical. And our mechanical electrical consultants were at home reviewing the footage, video, taking the taking captures, telling the guys to look at the boiler or whatever it is that they look at. I won't go into any details of that because I don't know. And I think we're going to start to get to the point where we're going to have a lot more kind of internal drones. We're going to have a lot more data captured through different guises that will then be reviewed, analysed and reported on without going to site.
Yeah.
What we're also seeing a lot more of is consolidation of reports. So getting multiple reports, extracting the data that's needed and producing that data. And on a day-to-day basis, quality assurance, it's the first point of quality assurance should be AI, right?
Yeah, totally agree with that.
Check my spelling.
Perfect use case. Yeah.
Check my grammar. Have I put something in the body of my report which should really be in the executive summary?
Yeah.
Have I put a cost in the body of the report that isn't in the CapEx table? Those types of things that, do get missed.
I think you can go a step further with that, though, does this report comply with our guidance for writing this kind of report? Have I followed best practice? Because you can take your organizational knowledge, your learning, and I'm not quite sure how you would store that yourself, but say it's in your kind of operating procedures, maybe it's in your kind of risk frameworks. If you can give that to an AI system, you can essentially you can measure everything by your best practice, which is I think I guess it's more audit than QA perhaps, but it's kind of getting into the space where you're helping with the reasoning and the decision, not just extracting a bit of data and kind of checking it.
Well, I think it's both. I think it's both those things. It's audit and quality assurance, right? Because the standard operating procedure has been put there in order to make sure that you produce something that's really good, right? So I absolutely agree. So that's something that's happening.
Out of interest, what would you call the kind of the playbooks for different types of building surveys? Would you call them standing operating procedures, checklists?
Standard operating procedures. Right. I mean, there's RICS guidance on all of these things, right? Which is kind of the starting point, and then dependent on the client. Often, the report is. They're all consistent, but often certain clients have different views on how they want to repair or replace, or they want more information around asbestos, or they want more information around earthquakes, or whatever it may be, right? So they do change a little bit. So you maybe have a different set of procedures for different client bases.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, and collecting that nuance and operationalizing it in your technology is actually, I would say, one of the big differences between, hey, this is quite good, this has got me 70% of the way, to, oh, wow, that's spotted something I would have otherwise missed, or this has got us 90% of the way.
Well, and the other thing is that, this kind of, the ability for a particular client to go quickly is a massive USP for them, right? We, as a business, we surveyed something like 12,000 warehouses across Europe in the last 2 or 3 years, right?
Yeah.
Massive amounts of volume of data. We should, with all that data, be able to say, you're acquiring a 300,000 square foot warehouse in Northampton. It's got a 5-year lease left. Therefore, your capex is going to be between X and Y.
Yeah.
Within a level of comfort. That's really helpful. And then the due diligence process is then just narrowing that down and seeing if there's anything off that.
Yeah, I guess almost referencing across your kind of underlying data set. How far away are you from that?
We can do it on an ad hoc basis. I think if someone said, this is what I've got, we could take the data and do it. Could we plug it into a sort of a calculator? Yeah. Probably not. I don't think we're too far away from it.
We talked a bit about robotics, but perhaps, I know that's perhaps a step beyond some of the more immediate use cases, or some of the kind of today use cases, which I would generally summarize as everything's in a PDF.
Yeah.
And maybe someone handwrote.
You're not
PDF.
Still going on about PDFs.
I am still going
obsessed
on about PDFs.
With PDFs.
When I have killed the last PDF in our industry, and all of our data is freed from these documents, I'll stop talking about them. Yeah. But for now,
you're certainly not sponsored by Adobe then.
No, quite, no.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's the day-to-day which we should just be getting on with, right? And there's loads of applications for it. And I think it's really difficult for me to kind of say this is how you should use it or how you should use it or whatever. But for me, I just want the team that work with me, I just want them to use it, right? Just use it,
what about I like personal use cases I'm always fascinated in. Like what you talked about email drafting, but I know that you've worked with a ton of different tools. Yep. You've got your own Arcadis GPT.
Yep.
I know you're a user of ChatGPT. I know you've done you at least played around with, if not properly tried out Microsoft Copilot. Like, what do you think? Like, what do you think of the landscape?
I love ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I just think it is incredible. Right, the ability now to upload documents is brilliant. Now, that was a game changer. Yeah. I think there's like in the last week or so, is there something you can check like live internet or something? I saw on something.
There's they've just released a search. It's their versus Google bet, as it were.
I mean, what does that do for websites? That's the thing that's in my mind. Is that going to kill the website? Because if you don't need to click on the website, why spend a fortune?
It's a good question. Although it's a very, very long way away from not having to click on the website.
Well, you say that now.
Today. Soon,
I mean, what else do I use it for? I mean, I genuinely use it every day for something.
Yes.
Responding to people, understanding. If someone sent me an email and I'm not quite sure the context of the email, is it a complaint or is it actually a friendly email? Or just that kind of thing it can be really, really useful. I do a lot around putting documents in and asking questions of the documents and getting to the point that I need, and asking where in the document have you found it, because as I say, we've all had issues where
of course.
I mean, if you typed into GPT what was my career, it's very different to what it actually was, right? So there's that. Copilot, we're testing it at work. Personally, I don't like it. I think if it did what it says it should do, it would be phenomenal. But it just feels like it's not quite there for me. I was so excited when they said it's on PowerPoint, because I have no creativity. Right? I'm a building surveyor. I've got no creativity. I can tell your roof's broken, but other than that, and I just wanted to write in the box. This is what I want my slide content to be, and it just doesn't really do it.
You just can't get there.
I tried a few times, and I'm sure it will get there. But it's not there yet for me. And then when GPT was able to accept kind of Excel, I found that really useful, and I think you're as well to use GPT as you are the Copilot system for it. I just haven't found it that useful.
You're not the only one, I would say.
I'd love to.
I think the marketing is perhaps ahead of the product at least.
It's
I think though it's very difficult to build a sort of intelligent product that works for absolutely everyone in every use case. And part of me wonders whether there's just a sort of almost flaw in the product philosophy there of like, sure, there are use cases that are universal to everyone, like drafting an email. And you would imagine Copilot in Outlook should be great at helping you draft an email. It sounds like it doesn't quite work for you though. But when you get into kind of more nuanced stuff, like building inspections and complex reports and how you deal with the analysis kind of visual elements, like it having to do with that at the same time as deal with analyzing in theory pictures of shoes for e-commerce, it's just too big a problem set, right? You need some specificity to say, okay, let's focus in on a domain, build that domain expertise, and kind of build it into the intelligence of the system.
Which I guess is what's happening with GPT and the kind of the apps, right? So you select one that kind of is a bit more specific.
With ChatGPT you have the GPTs. That's
a lot of what GPT, it's called?
Which allows you to kind of add context and some kind of knowledge. But again, still there, like the you're kind of tied into one model provider, and the way OpenAI's models work are obviously brilliant at many things, but not everything. And as you get more and more into kind of like real estate concepts and how real estate works, obviously you start hitting areas where there's just no data on the internet.
Yeah.
So you kind of need that help. But also I think as you work on bigger and bigger projects, more complex stuff, I mean, some of the things that we're kind of really excited about now is, you take a deal room with a big deal room with 1,000 documents in and get everything you need straight off, rather than having to kind of cut it up into chunks and work through that. Yeah,
no, I mean, you're right. There's some specifics out there that are just phenomenal. I mean, I talk quite regularly to Natan over at Built AI, and their products around reviewing opportunities is just phenomenal, right? I mean, it's outside of my space, but I can see the value in it. The work that you do, it's just like, again, I can see the value, and we're trying out some of these sort of kind of data in products maybe that the law firms use at the moment, and I can absolutely see it, but it doesn't feel like anyone's kind of the go-to at the minute for me. And I think from a value perspective for people building these products and building the industry, probably building surveying is fairly low down their list, right? So I think there's one thing that kind of I'm constantly battling with at work is this: do we build something, or do we wait for it to be built? And things are happening so quickly. It's really difficult to come up with that kind of use case that says we can get this done quickly and efficiently. It's worth investing in. That's the dilemma for me at the moment, and probably a lot of the industry, really.
Well, it's a tough decision, right? Because I feel like it's not discussed particularly honestly. The overarching narrative for build yourself is, hey, Gen AI makes everything easy to build, just plug in a model and happy days. But actually the sort of layer between the model and the outcome you want is incredibly kind of complex and cutting edge engineering. And not only do you have to build it, you have to maintain it. You also have to manage performance shifts when model versions change, and even when model versions don't change. And that kind of, okay, we've built something, and now we need to maintain it kind of pattern is what has tripped up many organizations trying to build their own technology, right?
100%. And I'm very much in the frame of mind, do what you're good at, right?
Exactly.
And pay people who know what they're talking about, right? And I guess I should be like that because I'm a consultant, right?
Well, quite. There's some vested interest there.
But yeah, I mean, you can very easily get caught up in it. And I think, when you're not that way minded. So I think of it like that. I think it's, of course we can just build this. Why is this so difficult? Because I can do that. What doesn't occur to me is those updates, and when I can never understand how something software wise breaks,
right?
Because I'm like, well, it's built, what's broken it, right? I haven't knocked it with a hammer, so how has it broken? So maybe I'm not the best person to ask that question.
The world around it changes is one of the easiest ways. So one thing I'm really keen to kind of make sure we cover for our listeners is the sort of practical advice that you would share to kind of make headway as specific as possible. Like, what if there's one thing you want everyone listening to the podcast to take away and maybe to try out, what would that be?
Well, that is quite a question. I think for me and for my team and within my industry, I just want people to start using the software that is available. Right. And use it regularly and be honest about using it, and don't be frightened, and it isn't taboo. I think the difficulty is, as a sort of someone who manages a business, is there's always this kind of request that we see a financial improvement for it, right? I'm not sure in the short term we are going to see that, right? I think a lot of work gets done on it, and it gets kind of hidden. We're not maybe showing the improved productivity as a result. Right? It's
hard to measure, right? And if you're not encouraging people to share, and
absolutely. And I think it's really important, particularly for senior individuals within organizations, to show that they're using it, that they understand it, and also to like, that we might be moving out of the industry soon or whatever as an individual, but we want people coming into the industry to feel that that's day one, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's not something that you should be frightened of doing, and take those ideas and expertise to the people within your organization that can make those changes and work with you to build business cases. And I think we just need to, if we've got an idea, just share it, because as someone who's not in that space, I'm not going to be able to build it, right? Yeah. If I have a great idea, let's get it done, right? Because it will help.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think it's as easy as just use it, work with it, try it out. It's really not complicated. I'm certainly not a techie by any stretch of the imagination. So I guess that's it, really.
That makes sense. Yeah, learn by experimenting and doing. Yeah. I feel though that the other part that's important you're talking about there is, which we hear less of, is encourage your teams, your colleagues to talk about what they've learned and what they're doing. Like, let's not create the kind of shadow Gen AI where you've got graduates sitting at home with a kind of AI laptop that they're emailing questions to. Let's open it up and take the benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no point in it, right? Yeah. And 90% of the time, if someone's just, it's the same way like when I was at school and CD-ROM started to come out, right? And people would, their teacher would ask them a question for their homework, and they'd just paste in the encyclopedia version, right? It's the same with ChatGPT. If you just ask it a one-liner, it will give you an answer that absolutely anyone can see that you've done it, right?
Yeah, 100%.
You have to work with it, and you have to be able to show you know what you're talking about. But let's just be honest with ourselves and use it to the best of its ability, in the same way that we're using laser tapes and not a tape measure.
I like that. Thank you, Ross. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, really
it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.